There is a strange little corner of the used car market where the cars that look the least impressive can quietly save you the most money. And right now, 3 old wagons are sitting in driveways, used car lots, and Facebook Marketplace listings, being ignored by buyers who would rather finance a $40,000 crossover. That might be one of the most expensive mistakes a budget buyer can make, because while the new crossover gets the giant touchscreen, the turbocharged engine, the monthly payment, and the complicated electronics, these old wagons were built during an era when a family car was expected to haul groceries, survive winters, carry kids, swallow furniture, and keep running long after the loan was paid off. They are not perfect. They are not maintenance-free. And no honest person can promise that any 20-year-old car will magically run forever. But buy the right version, inspect it properly, and keep up with the basic fluids, and these 3 forgotten wagons have the kind of reputation that makes a lot of newer, expensive vehicles look embarrassingly disposable. The best part is that most shoppers do not want them anymore. Everybody wants an SUV. Everybody wants a crossover. Everybody wants the tall body, the big grille, and the feeling that they bought something modern. That means the smart second owner gets to shop where the crowd is not looking. And the final car on this list may be the best example of that anywhere in the used car market, because one version wears a dead American badge while hiding Toyota engineering underneath. That badge alone can save the right buyer thousands of dollars. But before we get there, the first wagon is probably the easiest one to find almost anywhere in America. And for somebody who deals with rain, snow, rough roads, dogs, tools, or weekend trips, it can replace a much more expensive SUV without asking you to live like you bought an economy car. The first one is the Subaru Outback, especially the 4th-generation cars from roughly 2010 through 2014. The Outback is technically the wagon that America refused to let die. While almost every other automaker walked away from wagons, Subaru kept selling the idea by adding ground clearance, standard all-wheel drive, roof rails, and just enough rugged styling to convince buyers that they were not buying their parents' station wagon. That turned out to be a very smart formula, because underneath the outdoorsy image, the Outback is still a lower, easier-to-drive family vehicle, with a huge cargo area and far better road manners than many tall, truck-like SUVs. For an older buyer, that matters. You do not have to climb up into it like a pickup, and you do not have to drop down into it like a sports car. You slide in, you sit at a comfortable height, and you get excellent visibility. For a retired driver who wants one vehicle for grocery runs, road trips, bad weather, and the occasional trip down a dirt road, an old Outback can make a lot more sense than taking on a $500 monthly payment. Now here is where you have to buy with your eyes open, because not every Outback is the same, and this is exactly where lazy used car advice gets people into trouble. The 2010 through 2012 4-cylinder cars are not identical to the 2013 and 2014 4-cylinder cars. On the earlier cars, timing belt service matters. If you are looking at one with high mileage and the seller cannot show you when that work was done, you do not simply shake hands and hope for the best. You price the service into the deal, or you walk away. On the later 2013 and 2014 4-cylinder cars, Subaru moved to a different engine design, but that does not mean you stop inspecting the car. You still check the oil level, look underneath for leaks, listen carefully on a cold start, and pay attention to how the transmission behaves on the test drive. The mistake is believing that the Subaru badge automatically means the car is bulletproof. It does not. Maintenance history is what separates a cheap old Outback from an expensive old problem. What makes the right one worth hunting is the basic package. You get real all-weather traction, useful ground clearance, a long roof, a low cargo floor, and a massive supply of used parts and independent mechanics who already know these cars. In the Rust Belt, however, the first inspection should happen underneath the car, not under the hood. A beautiful interior and shiny paint mean nothing if the subframes, Brake lines, suspension mounting points, and exhaust have been eaten alive by 15 winters of road salt. Put the car on a lift. A pre-purchase inspection is not optional when you are buying a high-mileage old Subaru. Spend a couple $100s before you buy, because that small inspection can stop you from buying a $5,000 car that needs another $5,000 underneath. The other thing to remember is that these cars usually attracted practical owners. That can be good because many were maintained carefully, but it can also mean you find one that spent its entire life carrying dogs, kayaks, camping gear, and half of a hardware store. Cosmetic ugliness is not always a bad thing. A faded bumper, scratched cargo area, or ugly set of wheels can scare away the emotional buyer while doing absolutely nothing to the engine. That is where the bargain can be hiding. The Outback I would buy is not the cheapest one on the internet. It is the boring one with a clean title, a stack of service records, matching tires, no major rust, no overheating history, and an owner who can tell you what fluid was changed and when. That car might cost a little more up front, but it can still be dramatically cheaper than replacing it with a modern crossover. Properly maintained examples can reach very high mileage, and seeing one well past 200,000 miles is not unusual. 300,000 is possible, but it should be treated as the result of maintenance and a good individual car, not a guarantee printed on the badge. That honesty is important because the smartest used car buyer does not ask, "Can this model run forever?" He asks, "Has this particular car been treated well enough to keep running?" And that question becomes even more important with the second wagon, because number 2 can feel like a luxury car for economy car money. But buying the wrong one can punish you. Number 2 is the Volvo V70 and its tougher, lifted relative, the XC70. These cars come from an era when Volvo built family wagons with the subtlety of a bank vault. They are big, square, comfortable, practical, and almost aggressively uninterested in looking fashionable. That is exactly why they can be such good used car values. A new luxury crossover sells an image. An old Volvo wagon sells space, seats, safety engineering, and the ability to carry an unbelievable amount of stuff without advertising to the neighborhood how much money you spent. The V70 is the cleaner play for the buyer who wants simplicity. The older, naturally aspirated V70 with the 5-cylinder engine is the version many budget-minded Volvo people like, because you are avoiding some of the extra complexity that comes with turbocharging and all-wheel drive. The XC70 is the choice for somebody who wants more ground clearance and bad weather capability. But you have to understand that the additional equipment also creates additional things to inspect. Do not walk into an old European wagon expecting Toyota Corolla repair bills. That is how people get angry at perfectly good cars. The trick is not buying the cheapest Volvo. The trick is buying the best maintained Volvo you can afford. There is a huge difference between a $5,000 V70 owned for 15 years by a retired engineer with a folder of receipts and a $3,000 V70 that has changed hands 6 times and has dashboard warning lights glowing like a Christmas tree. They may look like the same car in the online listing. They are not the same car. With these Volvos, service history is almost part of the vehicle itself. Look for evidence of timing belt service where applicable. Check the crankcase ventilation system. Look for oil leaks. Make sure every electrical accessory works. Pay attention to front suspension clunks because bushings, control arms, and worn suspension pieces can add up. On an automatic car, the transmission should shift cleanly when cold and when fully warmed up. On an XC70, make sure the all-wheel drive system actually works, because repairing neglected AWD hardware can erase the bargain very quickly. None of those weaknesses mean the car is bad. They mean you are buying an old machine, and old machines reward inspection. The reason the Volvo deserves to be here is that once you find a good one, there is a solidity to these cars that is difficult to replace at the same price. The seats are famously comfortable. The cargo area is huge. The roofline is practical instead of fashionable. Visibility is good. The doors close with that heavy, old-school feeling that makes a lot of newer cars feel strangely hollow. For an older driver doing long highway trips, a clean V70 can be one of the most relaxing, cheap cars you can buy. It does not need to impress anybody at the country club. It just needs to start every morning and carry everything you own. And unlike some old luxury cars, you are not buying a complicated V8 sedan with air suspension, 12 electronic control modules for the seats, and brake parts that cost more than the car. You are still dealing with European car labor rates if you take it to the wrong shop. Which is why the single smartest thing you can do before buying one is find an independent Volvo specialist. Do that before you buy the car, not after something breaks. A good independent shop can tell you which engine and year make sense in your area, inspect the car before money changes hands, and keep you away from dealer labor rates. That relationship can turn an old Volvo from a scary used luxury car into a very reasonable long-term vehicle. Price is where things get interesting, because the wagon market is inconsistent. Some clean, low-mileage examples have become surprisingly expensive because enthusiasts know what they are, while rough, high-mileage cars can still be dirt cheap. So forget the fantasy of finding a perfect, one-owner, garage-kept Volvo for $2,000 every weekend. That is not the market anymore. The value is in finding an older car with good mechanical history for far less than the cost of a new crossover, then keeping a repair reserve in the bank. I would rather buy an $8,000 old wagon with records and keep $2,000 available for repairs than spend every dollar I have on a newer car with no financial cushion. That is how smart used car ownership works. You buy the car and you buy yourself breathing room. But there is still one vehicle that takes this whole idea further, because the final wagon is cheaper to repair, simpler to understand, easier to find parts for, and in one version, it has a badge on the hood that actually helps you negotiate the price down. This is the one most buyers overlook completely. Number one is the Toyota Matrix and the Pontiac Vibe, especially the first-generation cars with the standard 1.8-liter engine. The Matrix is one of those vehicles that makes almost no sense in the modern market, because if Toyota released the same basic idea today, the company would probably put black plastic around the wheel arches, raise it an inch, call it an adventure crossover, and charge $30,000. Back then, they just sold it as a practical hatchback. That lack of image is the reason you should care. The Matrix gives you Corolla family mechanical simplicity in a tall, square body that can swallow furniture, bicycles, tools, dogs, luggage, or a week of groceries. Fold the rear seats down, and the cargo area becomes one of the most useful spaces you will find in a car this small. It is easy to get in and out of. It is easy to park. It does not drink fuel like a truck. Parts are widely available. And almost any independent mechanic in America understands the basic Toyota hardware underneath it. But the real used car secret is the Pontiac Vibe. The Vibe came from the General Motors and Toyota partnership, and underneath the Pontiac badge is engineering closely related to the Toyota Matrix and Corolla family. That is why the Vibe is such an interesting bargain. The Pontiac name disappeared years ago, and plenty of ordinary buyers see the badge and assume they are looking at some forgotten General Motors economy car with impossible to find parts. The people who know these cars see something very different. They see a practical Toyota-related drivetrain wearing a badge that does not get the Toyota tax. That does not mean every part is identical, and it does not mean you should blindly buy any Vibe with 4 tires. It means the car deserves a place on your search list. For the simplest long-term ownership, the first-generation base cars with the 1.8-liter engine are the ones I would look at first. They are not fast. Nobody is going to pull up next to your Vibe at a gas station and ask to take a picture. That is the beauty of it. You are not paying for horsepower you do not need or status that disappears the moment the next model year arrives. You are paying for a small engine, a useful body, cheap basic parts, and a drivetrain with a strong reputation for high-mileage service when it is maintained. The honest weakness is oil consumption on some examples, especially as mileage climbs. That is why the first thing you do when looking at one is check the oil. Pull the dipstick before the seller has a chance to warm the car up and prepare it for your visit. If the oil is barely touching the stick, and the owner looks confused when you ask how often he checks it, leave. A durable engine can still be destroyed by an owner who drives it 3 quarts low. Look for blue smoke. Listen for ugly noises on cold start. Check for leaks. Inspect the cooling system. Make sure the transmission shifts correctly. Look underneath for rust, because a Toyota engine cannot save a body that has dissolved around it. And inspect the interior closely, because these cars were often used like small work vans. A worn cargo area is fine. Water damage, mold, electrical problems, and signs of serious neglect are not. There were sportier versions with different engines and more performance, but if your goal is boring, old-school reliability, boring is exactly what you should buy. This is not the car for the person trying to impress his neighbors. It is the car for the person who wants to watch his neighbors make payments while his $5,000 hatchback keeps starting. And here is the part that makes the Matrix and Vibe so dangerous to the new car sales pitch. For a lot of people, they do almost everything the modern compact crossover is supposed to do. They carry people, they carry cargo, they are easy to park. They are easy to get in and out of, they can deliver decent fuel economy. The Vibe was even offered with all-wheel drive in some versions, although the simplest front-wheel drive setup is usually the one I would choose if low repair costs are the priority. What they do not give you is the giant screen, the lane centering system, the turbocharged engine, the panoramic roof, the heated steering wheel, or the monthly payment. You have to decide which one of those things actually matters to your life. Because there are people right now paying $600 or $700 every month for a vehicle that spends 90% of its time carrying one person and a bag of groceries. Meanwhile, an old Matrix is doing the exact same job with no payment at all. That is the hidden value. The cheapest car is not always the car with the lowest purchase price. The cheapest car is the one that gives you the work you need while keeping the most money in your bank account over the years you own it. That is why you should never buy one of these wagons based on price alone. A $2,000 car that immediately needs tires, brakes, suspension, a catalytic converter, air conditioning work, and a transmission is not a $2,000 car. It is a $7,000 car wearing a $2,000 price tag. The smart move is to find the cleanest example, get a pre-purchase inspection, run the vehicle history, check the title, look underneath for rust, and keep money in reserve for the things every old car eventually needs. Rubber gets old, bushings wear out, shocks leak, alternators fail. Air conditioning compressors do not care that the engine has a reputation for reliability. The goal is not to find a magical car that never breaks. The goal is to find a car where the major mechanical foundation is strong enough that normal repairs still make financial sense. That is the difference between a repair and a money pit. Put these 3 wagons side by side, and each one solves a different problem. The Subaru Outback is the all-weather choice for the buyer who needs ground clearance and confidence in bad conditions, but does not want to pay modern SUV money. The Volvo V70 and XC70 are for the buyer who wants comfort, cargo space, and that heavy old-school highway car feeling, and is willing to maintain a European car properly. And the Toyota Matrix or Pontiac Vibe is the pure budget play, the boring little cargo box that can quietly become the smartest vehicle in the driveway. My favorite of the group, for the person terrified of repair bills, is still the first-generation Matrix or Vibe with the basic 1.8-liter drivetrain, and I would absolutely search for the Pontiac first, because the badge can still make some buyers walk right past it. That is where used car bargains come from, not from finding a secret car that nobody on earth has heard of, but from understanding a car better than the person selling it and better than the other buyers scrolling past the listing. The market rewards image. Smart buyers reward condition. The market sees an old wagon and thinks outdated. You should see a paid-off vehicle with room for your life. The market sees a Pontiac badge and thinks dead brand. You should look underneath and find out what the car actually is. The market sees 180,000 miles and panics. You should look at maintenance records, rust, oil consumption, transmission behavior, and the actual condition of the machine. Mileage matters, but history matters more. A neglected car with 90,000 miles can be a worse buy than a carefully maintained car with 180,000. That is the lesson the new car business rarely puts in the commercial. You do not beat the used car market by buying the cheapest car. You beat it by buying the car everybody else misunderstands. And right now, old wagons are still one of the best places to look. They are not glamorous. They are not trendy. They will not make your driveway look richer, but the right one can keep tens of thousands of dollars out of a dealership and in your retirement account, your emergency fund, or your pocket. Before you finance another crossover because a salesman tells you your old car is outdated, spend one afternoon looking at a clean Outback, a maintained V70, or a boring Pontiac Vibe. Get it inspected. Look at the records. Ignore the badge. Ignore the fashion. Buy the condition. Because sometimes the car nobody wants is not a bad car at all. Sometimes it is simply the car nobody has figured out yet, and the person who figures it out first is the one who drives home with the bargain.